if you have anything, come out as fast as possible and get it to any detachment or a- any police service that you have available to get to talk to. And Jack just absolutely loves bugs, dinosaurs, anything like that. But Lily loves girly things, but she also loves doing everything with Jack. Bugs, they're like best friends, not just brother and sister. Still holding out hope. I don't know why they didn't find anything.
This is where the children's swings stand,
Or
their favorite spot.
at all.
Their laughter used to echo here. But listen closely to the 911 call made on May 2nd, 2025. Investigators say they are still exploring every possibility behind the disappearance of these two young siblings. On that call, you hear a mother's trembling voice, "My children are gone. They just vanished." Barely 20 minutes earlier, she swore she heard them playing in the next room. Then, sudden silence. No footsteps. No laughter. No trace of life. And here's the detail that makes the blood run cold: the back door, the supposed escape route. It doesn't creak, doesn't bang, it opens almost silently. Even the stepfather admitted it. Two children, only 4 and 6, allegedly dressed themselves, unlatched a gate, and slipped into the dense Nova Scotia woods, without making the faintest sound. Impossible? You're not the only one thinking that. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will upend everything you thought you knew about missing children. The emergency call was logged at 10:03 a.m. But dispatch records later revealed the disappearance occurred closer to 8:20 a.m. That's nearly 2 hours of missing time, 2 hours where anything could have unfolded. 2 hours that would become the shadow at the center of this investigation. If you're watching from Canada, drop a maple leaf in the comments. If you're watching from elsewhere, tell us where, because this story is about to take you through a nightmare of family secrets, fractured truths, and a silence that hides something unspeakable. The caller was Malia Brooks Murray. Her voice cracked as she begged for help. Her daughter Lily, 6, and her son Jack, 4, gone. She said she woke to an eerie stillness. Moments earlier, the house was filled with the sounds of children at play. Now, nothing. But something didn't line up. Neighbors living within earshot reported hearing no shouting, no panicked calls, not until police cars arrived. Daniel Martel, the children's stepfather, gave investigators a version of the morning that was unsettlingly detailed. He said Lily came to the doorway several times, that he shushed her because baby Meadow was asleep. He knew exactly what Jack had on, his dinosaur boots. Yet, in the same breath, he admitted he never saw Jack at all that morning. How do you describe a child's outfit if you never laid eyes on them? The family's home was a trailer deep in the forest near Landone Station, Nova Scotia, a town of barely 100 people. Remote, isolated. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone knew how to keep secrets. This was where Malia had moved with her children in 2023, leaving behind her First Nation community, her roots, her safety net. The children had already been cut off from the outside world long before they vanished. And then came the contradictions. Daniel insisted he immediately searched the woods, calling their names, driving dirt roads. Yet the 911 call wasn't made until nearly 2 hours later. He first said the children had only missed school Thursday and Friday because Lily was sick. Later, he changed it, they hadn't been to school all week. But a teacher remembered Lily in class on Monday, April 29th. That meant that between Tuesday, April 29th, and Friday, May 2nd, nobody outside the home saw either child. Not neighbors, not staff, not friends. For 72 hours, Lily and Jack were effectively missing before anyone even picked up the phone to call for help. Their bus driver remembered them well, Lily in the front row, screaming with joy, Jack tossing his boots for attention. Talkative, excitable children. Not the nonverbal, severely autistic image their parents described to others. Why did the parents tell two different versions of who their children even were? The back door became the focus of the case. Both parents insisted it was nearly silent when opened. But for children known to leave doors wide open, suddenly closing it behind them in perfect stealth made no sense. Add to that the fence built to keep kids safe, latched, sturdy. Yet there were no signs of struggle, no bent wires, no disturbed ground. It was as if the children had passed through without leaving the slightest trace. By the next day, family tensions exploded into shouting matches outside the trailer. Within 24 hours, the parents themselves fractured. Malia left the search area with her baby and her family. Daniel claimed he never saw her again. In most cases of missing children, families cling together, united in grief and hope. Here, the family collapsed almost instantly. Child Protection Services even barred Daniel from being around his own infant daughter. And then there were the words. Both parents, only days after the disappearance, slipped into past tense. They were awesome kids. Lilly loved girly things. Parents of missing children don't usually speak that way. They hold on to hope. They speak in present tense. Unless, deep down, they already know. By May 7th, just 5 days later, the RCMP confirmed everyone's worst fears. The probability of survival is extremely small. This wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It was a homicide investigation. Forensic teams took over. Underwater recovery units searched lakes. Cadaver dogs swept the forest. But no trace of Lilly or Jack has ever been found. 2 children, ages 4 and 6. Gone without a footprint. Gone without a sound. Gone without explanation. And somewhere, buried between those shifting stories and contradictions, lies the truth. Maybe the children had entered the woods alone, but the forest told a different story. There were no tracks to follow. No snapped branches under little feet, no marks on bark where a tiny hand might have clutched, no abandoned toys left like breadcrumbs to guide the searchers. All that remained was a single footprint, isolated in the damp earth, a fleeting, fragile mark of a child's presence. It pointed forward, but led nowhere. Into the shadows of the forest, the footprint vanished, as if swallowed by the trees themselves. For investigators, this was the first, and tragically, the last, trace of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. Every season tracker knows that children leave signs. A trail of crumbs, a snagged jacket, the faint echo of laughter bouncing off trees. Yet here, there was nothing. Only silence. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. No birdsong broke the stillness, no wind rustled through leaves in a way that hinted someone had passed through. The forest, usually so alive with evidence, had erased them. This solitary footprint would become a symbol of the impossible. 2 young children, ages 4 and 6, seemingly gone without a trace, leaving investigators with only questions, and a chilling emptiness where answers should have been. By May 15th, police had widened their focus beyond the Sullivan family. Trail cameras from April 27th to May 2nd were collected, 5 full days before the children were even reported missing. Why look for evidence before the 911 call? Why comb through days when, according to the public story, the children were still at home, safe and sound? What timeline were investigators really working from? Forensic analysts reviewed hours of grainy footage, empty driveways, quiet streets, no sign of frantic searching, no children walking to school, no unusual cars speeding by. Each frame seemed to contradict the official story, hinting that events had unfolded differently than the timeline everyone had been given. These 5 days became a window into a hidden reality, a period in which investigators suspected that something had gone horribly wrong long before the alarm was raised. It was a timeline no one outside the investigation was supposed to know, a shadow beneath the surface of the official narrative, quietly pointing toward a grim truth waiting to be uncovered. Lisa Scott, a neighbor, would later reveal that RCMP major crime officers asked not only about her vehicles, but also about any unusual activity or strange cars. When she suggested the children might have gone missing earlier than reported, an officer replied chillingly. They probably should have been around earlier. Earlier than the public story. Earlier than the 911 call. From the very start, the search wasn't about finding lost children, it was a homicide investigation. Every question, every recorded observation, every subtle glance from the officers carried an unspoken truth. The focus was not on rescue, but on uncovering a crime already committed. In a town of barely 100 people, this revelation hung like a shadow over the community. The neighbors, who believed they were witnessing a frantic search for missing children, were instead unknowingly part of an investigation into something far darker, something hidden behind the closed doors of the Sullivan trailer. But proving that truth required what they didn't have: a crime scene, witnesses, or physical evidence. What they did have was silence, conflicting family statements, and a vast, unforgiving forest stretching in every direction. Search experts know this: children always leave traces. A toy left behind, a shoelace snagged on a branch, a discarded wrapper, even a single footprint. Every movement, no matter how small, leaves a mark. But Lilly and Jack Sullivan left nothing. No evidence, no sign, no whisper of their passage through the dense wilderness. Over 160 trained searchers combed 4 square kilometers of rugged Nova Scotia terrain, dense woods, flood zones, hurricane deadfall, even bear country, armed with GPS trackers, drones, and thermal cameras. Teams called out, dogs strained on leads, drones swept over the canopy, but still, nothing surfaced. The forest, vast and silent, swallowed all traces. Every possible clue that should have existed was gone. In the eyes of the search teams, it was impossible. Children aged 4 and 6 don't vanish without leaving a trail. And yet, somehow, Lilly and Jack had done exactly that. And that was impossible. Children aged 4 and 6 don't vanish without a trail. They drop things, make noise, cry out. They don't move like silent commandos through wilderness. Yet somehow, Lilly and Jack allegedly did. Even the dogs confirmed it. Scent trails stopped abruptly at the tree line, as if the children had been lifted away. No fading scent. No gradual weakening of their presence. Just a hard stop. Investigators knew only one explanation could account for such a sudden disappearance: vehicular transport. But there were no tire tracks. No evidence of a vehicle passing through the search area. No signs that the children had walked into the unknown. It was as if the forest itself had swallowed them, erasing all evidence, all traces, all proof of their existence in those final moments before they vanished. The impossible had happened, and every expert involved knew it. By late May, the search effort had become chaotic, chasing false leads and sightings hundreds of miles away. Every tip seemed promising at first. Someone thought they saw a child on a distant road, a strange vehicle in a nearby town, but each lead ended in disappointment. Trail cameras told a different story: no children walking the road, no frantic parents searching, no cars rushing by. The official narrative of a desperate, ongoing search was crumbling under the evidence. Digital forensics stepped in to fill the gaps. Cell tower data meticulously mapped every phone near the Sullivan property, tracking movement down to precise locations. Daniel's own devices recorded his movements, his Google searches, his calls. He had either been shockingly transparent, or shockingly confident in his ability to erase evidence. Every keystroke, every signal, every timestamp told a story, one that would later make investigators question not just the timeline, but the very events surrounding Lilly and Jack's disappearance. But the silences were more revealing than the data. Between April 29th and May 2nd, both parents showed minimal digital activity. No posts. No calls to schools. No searches about sick children. For most parents, that silence signals a crisis too heavy to document, a moment when panic, fear, and desperation would normally be reflected in calls for help, frantic texts, and online searches. But for Daniel and Malia Sullivan, the digital void was deafening. Every unmade phone call, every absent message, every unrecorded search was a small, chilling signal: something was not right. Investigators later pieced together that this was a period in which the children had already gone missing, or worse. The absence of digital activity became a silent confession, speaking louder than any words could. The community's silence was louder still. In a town of barely 100 people, no one heard frantic searching on May 2nd. No cries, no alarmed neighbors rushing to help, no unusual sounds of urgency in the quiet streets. The Sullivan story of a sudden disappearance didn't match the reality, or rather, the absence of any reality. Teachers at a school of 86 students didn't question the children's absence. In a normal scenario, even a day of unexplained absence would trigger calls home, concern from staff, or at least a note in the attendance logs. Yet here, everything was recorded as routine, as if nothing had happened. People closed ranks. Friends, neighbors, and townsfolk, perhaps instinctively, perhaps knowingly, kept their distance. Their silence became a protective shell around the family, or perhaps a quiet acknowledgement of what they suspected but dared not say aloud. The absence of noise, of frantic searching, of ordinary chaos, painted a grim picture. The official story of panic and sudden disappearance didn't match what actually unfolded in those days. The community, intentionally or otherwise, had already adapted to a hidden truth. And within that silence, investigators could see what the public could not. Lilly and Jack Sullivan weren't lost in the forest, they were already gone, and the town knew more than it revealed. Even as search teams combed the woods and drones scanned the canopy, the real clues were not in the trees but in the gaps of communication, in the empty trails of digital activity, and in the quiet conformity of a small town unwilling, or unable, to confront the horror quietly unfolding at the heart of their community. Every unanswered phone call, every classroom that remained silent, every neighbor who looked the other way became a piece of the puzzle. The absence of action spoke volumes. It was a silence that reverberated louder than any siren, louder than any search dog's bark, louder even than the forest itself. In those days between April 29th and May 2nd, the silence wasn't empty. It was heavy. It was revealing. And it was the first, most unambiguous evidence that the official story, of missing children suddenly swept into the wilderness, was already unraveling, thread by thread, before anyone had even picked up a search rope or set foot on the forest floor. Daniel's own words betrayed him. He described theatrics, running ahead of helicopters, thrashing in water, yet emerged spotless. Not a desperate father, but a profiler calmly explaining how children could be easy to take. Every action he recounted was filled with detail, almost like a scripted performance, where he ran, how he scanned the terrain, the precise way he imagined his children could evade capture or be removed. Yet on the ground, there was no evidence of the chaos he described. No mud clinging to clothing, no scuffed shoes, no fatigue on his face, only the calm composure of a man meticulously controlling the narrative. Investigators noted the dissonance immediately. Most parents thrust into a missing child crisis exhibit frantic, erratic behavior, leaving traces everywhere, overturned objects, panicked calls, rushed notes. Daniel's calmness, his precise explanations, and his ability to articulate removal strategies with clinical clarity suggested something far darker than mere search efforts. It suggested premeditation, or at the very least, foreknowledge. Malia's words were worse. Within 24 hours, she spoke of sorrow and grief, using past tense when her children were supposedly alive. The phrasing was subtle, but unmistakable to trained investigators. While the public believed Lilly and Jack were still missing, her language betrayed acceptance. She wasn't searching. She was mourning. Every word, every choice of tense, every pause became evidence in its own right. In a community of barely 100 people, in the first 24 hours of what should have been a frantic search, she chose grief over action. The distinction was critical, the difference between parents hoping for the return of their children and parents acknowledging their loss. The investigators began to analyze every aspect of their speech. Daniel's descriptions were detailed, methodical, almost instructional. Malia's expressions were preemptive, mournful, and oddly detached. Even their tones, the rise and fall of their voices, the way they emphasized certain words, were studied as carefully as any physical evidence. Cutaways to empty forest floors, abandoned playgrounds, and toys left untouched reinforced the narrative. The children were gone, and those who should have been searching were already performing rituals of mourning. Flowers, candles, stuffed animals placed at memorials were acts of grief, not rescue. Every action, or lack thereof, was a reflection of intention. Daniel's composure and Malia's linguistic choices formed a web of indirect evidence, more revealing than fingerprints, footprints, or DNA. They told a story that the forest and the search efforts could not, that Lilly and Jack Sullivan did not vanish into the wilderness, they had already been taken from it, and their parents' words quietly confirmed it. For investigators, parsing language became as critical as combing the dense woods. Every syllable was a clue, every tense a timeline. Within hours, patterns emerged. The theatrical accounts of danger, the calm, clinical tone, and the preemptive grief painted a picture that physical evidence alone could never provide. The scene closes with lingering shots, Daniel walking along the forest edge, Malia seated with the photo of her children, and the empty, silent town around them. The camera pans slowly over abandoned toys, the wind rustling through trees, and the stillness of a world that had already begun to accept the unthinkable. In those first 24 hours, language itself became a crime scene. Daniel and Malia's words betrayed them more fully than any physical trace could. For investigators, it was clear, the children were gone, and their parents knew it. The truth was already written in their language. In the careful phrasing of Daniel and Malia, in the past tense of sorrow and grief, in the precision of his explanations and the detached mourning of hers, the story had been told long before any search party combed the forests. Lilly and Jack Sullivan didn't disappear into the forest. They didn't wander off, they didn't get lost, they died in those unaccounted days before May 2nd. The forest held no evidence because it was never their final resting place. Every silence, every absence, every carefully chosen word painted a narrative that investigators could read like a map. The children's lives had ended quietly, deliberately, and someone, maybe many people, in Landone Station knew exactly how. The small town, cloaked in its quiet routines, held secrets no search dogs or drones could uncover. The memorials, the vigils, the whispered condolences, these were acknowledgments of a reality too painful to confront openly. And as investigators pieced together digital traces, trail camera footage, and human behavior, the grim picture became undeniable. The official story of lost children was a facade. The forest, the search, the chaos, all of it had been a stage. And in the shadows of Landone Station, the real events, the real culpability, had already been set in motion. The answers would emerge slowly, methodically, as the investigation peeled back the layers of silence, deception, and hidden knowledge. For Lilly and Jack, there would be no miraculous rescue, no happy ending. Only the stark truth that some tragedies are written not in the trees or on the ground, but in the quiet, revealing language of those who should have loved and protected them.